Well, let's get started. So thank you so much for joining us. This is next episode of The Lighthouse. I'm here with Osvaldo Morales. He's going to be walking us through his journey, his path. So why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. My name is Osvaldo Morales. I go by Oz, nice and short, single syllable. I can remember the name with all the head trauma that I've suffered playing hockey. I'm fortunate to be here, and I'm fortunate to have garnered the attention, people like Alfonso, to have me here, and I just hope to share my experiences. I'm a bit of a mutt. Grew up in Chile until, I was about 8. Then we were politely asked to leave the country because of my dad's political decisions. Ended up in Argentina for a minute. And then we went up to Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, which is where I went to school and had my formative years. Didn't like the cold, played a lot of hockey, but I wanted to get out. Got on with a company called IPL Enbridge. Eventually ended up in Houston, Texas. Then went on with a little company called Amazon, who was really struggling in the early days, not so much. And then eventually moved on, wore off my NDA with Amazon so I could go work for Microsoft for 5 years. And here we are, starting in my own part of my startup that I'm heavily invested in, and fortunate to be in Austin, Texas with Alfonso.
Thank you very much. I feel like I want to start. We're going to hopefully cover all aspects of that career that you just mentioned in a 30-second blip. So thank you very much. So let's dive in. So you first, you mentioned growing up in Chile. You mentioned then going to Canada. What do you identify? Do you identify as Chilean? Do you identify as Canadian? A little bit of both. Like, what would be your go-to answer if you had to choose one?
If I had to choose one, I'm going to go with Canadian, although my friends have made a bunch of hockey jerseys for me that says Chilean on the back.
Chilean?
Because they're not quite sure of what I am
okay.
and which card I pull whenever I'm talking. But I would identify, being formative years in Canada, I would probably identify more as a Latin Canadian than anything else.
Okay. And yesterday we were talking, so I want to dive into this because I think there's a lot of listeners that your story is going to really, really shine and relate to them. So you grew up in Chile until you were 8, and that's when the coup happened in 1973. And so obviously you guys left the country. How much of that and the circumstances around the departure, I mean, everything you read about what was happening in the early 70s and in the country, it's scary. It's how much of that do you think imprinted anything in your brain as a child for how you operate, maybe how your parents operated? Do you think it affected you in any way as you started to grow into a teenager and eventually an adult?
Sure, you bet, right? So we, my father was heavily involved in politics. He was, spent some time in Russia during heavy communist years and then came back to Chile, married my mom, and then off he was politicking and helping his friend, Salvador Allende, who eventually became president of Chile in 1970. Took a very senior position in his government, right? And we're very well off in Chile, right? Like, I mean, we had need for nothing. My mom's family, are very, very kind, very well positioned, regardless of the government. They're apolitical, which is the smart thing to do. My dad's family were all on the left side of center and heavily involved, right? So 1973 came around and a lot of my dad's family lost everything. And then my dad was, he was slated to be jailed. So we left. We crossed the border with Argentina and lived illegally in Buenos Aires for a number of years, right? In the meantime, when the coup occurred, I mean, it was horrendous, right? I mean, people were literally getting shot in the streets, right? Our home was near the presidential residence, and I remember looking up on September 11th and watching the planes drop the bombs right on top of our house as they actually targeted the presidential residence, right? So we were looking up, we saw these fighters come in, dumping a bunch of bombs that were guided towards the presidential residence. It was horrible. People literally getting shot in the corner, right? So you'd leave, you'd go, and there'd be, dead people on the streets, right? So I mean, to me, that was like, oh, wow, I can't believe that this is happening. We went to Buenos Aires. My dad could never stay away from politics, and he started it up in Buenos Aires again. And then my mom gave an ultimatum, right? Like, you either cut this or I'm leaving with the kids. So my dad said, okay, well, stop. And then we immigrated to Canada. We didn't have passports, so we had to travel on UN travel documents. We went from Buenos Aires, Argentina. They bypassed Chile because they were afraid that the military was going to ensure that the plane landed in Chile so they could pull my dad and a couple more immigrants that were in that plane off. So we went to Lima, Peru, Mexico City, Vancouver, Canada, which we cleared immigrations, and ended up in Edmonton, Alberta. We lived in a motel, all of us in one room for about 6 months until we could get established.
This is in Canada?
In Canada, right? We're poor. I mean, we're dirt poor, right? Like, I mean, I remember true story. I remember a lot of Chilean community, like they would, because there was no money. So, we'd buy dog food, and that'd be our spread, so eventually, formative years, I never wanted to be in that position again.
Oh,
and I knew I was going to work as hard as required. My dad pulled me aside. I was pretty young. I think I was about 12. And he said, look, we have no money here. So the only thing I can leave you is an education. And, I've taken that over and given it to my daughter and everybody that talks to me. It's like, look, don't expect a big trust fund. You may get it. But at the end of the day, right, this is what you don't want to live through.
100%. We were talking about, and I think it's important to highlight it, but I want to come back to it. We were talking about the struggles that the generation that comes from that to be extremely successful, and just the struggles with parenting, and how do you balance the giving your daughter, for example, you're telling us the stories of how incredibly intelligent she is, and how obviously she got your genes probably, and
her mom's too
as well. Okay. And, but as hard as you'll try, she has a safety net because you're her father, and you didn't have that, and that's not your fault. That's not her fault. But that safety net created something in you that created this drive. And that doesn't mean she won't. But as a father, it's so much harder to create that drive when there's a safety net that even though you can try your hardest to not put it there, there's still a little one. And it's just how challenging that is. And so I'm curious to dive into that as we get, later in the conversation. I want to go back to Chile just for a second because I'm curious. And I asked you yesterday, but I'm curious for our listeners, who makes the best pisco sour, Chile or Peru?
I've thought about this long and hard since we discussed it. And I have to stick with Chile.
I would agree to all my Chilean friends. Please don't get mad. Please, hopefully you agree with me. I agree. Chilean pisco sour is better.
And to all the listeners, you've got to try the taste test, right? And make sure it's legit.
It's sweet. I'm a sweeter. I prefer sweet. It's sweeter. It's not as sour or tart as the.
Just enough tart. Just enough.
It was good.
Enough. Yeah. So you should try both and make sure that, it's best if you do a taste test in a place that recognizes both Peruvian and Chilean pisco sour. But I'm going to have to go with Chilean pisco sour.
You know what? I think anybody that's listening from Chile, that's like, he said he's Chilean. Okay, he picked the right one. That's good. All right, so I want to jump forward. So you get into Canada. You're there. And at that point in your life, any idea what you wanted to do as you grew up? Like, did you have any idea that you would be doing what you're doing now?
So my uncle on my dad's side of the family, they're all like super well educated, right? They're all engineers. My cousin is one of the top seismic engineers in the world, has a large company on my mom's side of the family.
Where do they live?
Chile.
In South and Latin America. Okay.
They're incredibly smart, incredibly well educated. I'm the oldest one. Like, I was the first boy coming into, and Alfonso, you probably realize, right, as well, right? Being a boy in a Latin family is a big deal. Being the first boy, accolades are sent your way. So
I was the youngest.
You're the youngest.
My oldest brother, I can probably absolutely attest to what you're saying.
So he was an engineer. He was a civil engineer, owned his own company. And he would leave American dollars, like $20, $100 inside. This back in the early 70s, so it was a lot of money in his books. I was 3 years old. I was 5 years old at the time. I'd go through his engineering books. I would read them, right? I would find the money and I'd keep it and I'd tell my mom, right? So I had a pile of money when I was super young from reading my uncle's books, right? I wanted to be an engineer for as long as I could remember.
So, okay.
Like, that is the only thing. If nothing else, that's what I was going to do.
You know what's interesting? There's a couple of themes that have come up as we were talking to people in these forums, and it's one or the other. They knew. The last interview we did was with a lady named Madeline, and she's a director of engineering for NVIDIA, and she said the exact same thing. She said, I knew as a kid this is what I was going to do. For me, I literally Googled at one point highest paying job out of college. And it resonated with what you said. Like all I knew is that I was going to work my butt off until I made something of myself. But I didn't know what. I didn't know how, but I just knew I was going to not be in this situation for the rest of my life. So I literally Googled at the time highest paying job out of college. And that's how I thought I was going to go into intellectual property law. Went to law school. I digress, but that's how I got into the world that I got into, is just Googled it. And I was like, all right, I don't know what they do or what that entails, but it pays that amount. I'm in. I'm going to figure out how to be that person. So you wanted to be an engineer from always?
Always. I cannot remember any time that I would have even considered, an alternate career.
Was the path for you into university something that you knew or your parents were able to help you with, or because you went to college in Alberta as well? Mm-hmm. Was there ever a thought of hey, go to a school in the States or go abroad or go to a different university? What was the mindset going from prep school or high school into university as far as how you made your choice?
So I think, the schools, the post-secondary institutions in Edmonton are pretty well regarded from an engineering perspective, right? And I actually did my research and thinking when I went to school, tuition was not expensive. Right. And my mom was a librarian at the U of A. So I knew that I didn't have to buy any books because I could get it from her. Right. So, okay. So, when I made my decision, it was okay, well, I could go to pretty well in school. I had very excellent grades coming out of a high school, right? And I was offered, I was offered, and I went to MIT, and I passed all their entrance exams requirements. So I had an open invitation, but it was only half a scholarship, right? So I needed to come up with something at the time $25,000 US to cover it's a lot of money. And I looked at it and I said, I think that having a degree from a major college is pretty cool. But they're not going to teach me anything that this school here that is well regarded is not going to teach me, right? I can be at home. I can have the comforts at home. I can use the family's vehicle. I can play hockey here. I can do everything I need to. There's no reason for me to leave Edmonton.
There's so many different ways to approach this. I just read a book, David versus Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell. He's one of my favorite authors. And there's a whole section where he speaks to exactly what you're just highlighting. He relates the problem to big fish, little pond, little fish, big pond, and just the different, what would be perceived as basically a Goliath, which is the Ivy League schools, versus what would be perceived as, say, a David, which is some of the non-traditional, not Ivy League, not the MITs, as you mentioned. It's how you perceive it and the value that you get from it that's more important. Both are great for different reasons. And so to your point, I love that you highlighted all the advantages of why staying where you stayed made sense for where you were. And I think there's a lot to be said there. So you graduated from there, mechanical engineering?
Yeah, mechanical engineering.
Okay. Did you know you wanted to do mechanical versus electrical versus civil?
The way I took a look at each disciplines, and to me, electrical was one, which I later on got a master's at the University of Delaware, right, in the States, in electrical engineering. But for me, mechanical was kind of a jack of all trades. You had a little bit of everything. Right. And at the risk of not being bored, I wanted to make sure that I actually, did a little bit of everything. Metallurgy, right? Civil, structural, some electrical control systems, thermodynamics, correct? I hold many patents in a lot of those areas. Right. So to me, I just wanted a broader education set. And if I wanted to specialize, I would specialize later on in life. Right. It proved to be, again, right. When I was younger again at home, my parents, when I was super young, they would keep all tools away from me because I'm a late sleeper. I've always had a tough time going to bed. So, come 2 o'clock in the morning when everybody was asleep,
things apart,
I would start taking things apart. Radios, televisions, beds. If it had screws and if I could get at it, I would disassemble it.
Yeah. No,
you know,
100%.
You know, so with that being said, right, like I always wanted to know how things work. Of course, when I was that young, I could not put, you know, things together
Quite the same way
quite
as
the same as they will. But,
yeah.
you know, like to me, a win was if I didn't have any extra parts and it actually semi-worked when it was done, right? So again, for me, I wanted to be a jack of all trades, and that discipline was the closest one to being a jack of all trades. I loved mineral engineering as well, mining engineering. But, you know, eventually as I started kind of seeing when I was young, like just how we were ripping apart this earth of ours, I thought maybe there's better ways out there to contribute to society effectively without tearing the earth in two, right? So,
you know, what's interesting, and my mom and dad own their own rock and lapidary company, and so they would import minerals, gems, fossils from Latin America, predominantly Mexico, into the U.S. And they had a store, and you know, but they came into the country with very little education, but they were incredibly intelligent people, and so I almost like you mentioned that there's so many times at night where I think like I wonder if my parents would have grown up with the same opportunities that I did, if they would have pursued like mineral engineering, like how different maybe their path would have been. So interesting that you said that, because that kind of like resonated with me specifically. So I want to highlight on something before we jump into post-college and then in your first job. What was your identity moving into coming from Chile, going into Canada? Because Canada is a very diverse country. How was your upbringing in Canada? Like, did you ever feel as a minority? Did you ever feel like you didn't belong? Like, I'm kind of curious to see what was that experience of growing up in Canada.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that, and I've given it some thought over the past actual couple of years as to, you know, I only discovered I was different in the U.S.
Okay.
Right. I was,
it's
you
deep.
know,
that's a deep statement.
You know, like, and in Canada, I just believed I was just another one of the individuals that, you know, would suffer the slings and arrows of living in Edmonton, you know, hellacious winters, the summers hit and miss, you know, large mosquitoes that needed runway lights to land on you. Right. And you know, like we'd do things like, you know, none of my friends were Latin. They were all Canadian, right? Like there were, you know, Scottish, Irish, German, a ton of Ukrainians in Edmonton, right? Those were my friends, right? And I never felt different. They never made me feel different. It didn't happen until I landed in the US when it was like, holy smokes, I am different.
You're different, yeah.
You know, so it was you know, like there'd be, you know, like initially I couldn't speak English all that well at all. So there'd be a lot of riffs that I had to deal with, you know, and I discovered, you know, like the friends, I still talk to some of my friends that, you know, I had during junior high. Right. And definitely through high school. Right. They've been around, you know, for 40 years.
I'm assuming you grew up speaking Spanish at home, English at school, or French?
English and French, right? So I went to a Catholic school system, and you're required, you know, like you're required a heavy French curriculum. So English and French. I didn't have Spanish at home all the time, right? My mom and dad just refused to speak English to all of us at home. So Spanish, English, and French at school. More English and French.
I'm curious because I grew up. We could not speak anything but Spanish at home as well. We would even get in trouble if there was especially if there were visitors visiting the house. Me and my brothers, if it was just us and our parents, the brothers would speak English to each other. But to our parents, it was always in Spanish. But if any visitor ever came that they did not speak English, God forbid you spoke English to your brothers, because we would get the wrath of our parents. It's respect. Like, you don't ever want to give them the impression you're talking about them. So that resonates 100% with what you're saying. So I'm curious. Okay, you come in, you graduated college. Did you know where you wanted to do from profession wise, or were you kind of trying to figure out what happens post college?
Well, I wanted to go work for Ford in Detroit, Michigan. And that was my dream. I wanted to build car engines, right? Internal combustion engines. That's what I longed for. But you're in Edmonton, Alberta, right? The only game in town is the oil field. I graduated very high of my class, so I had many job offers, right? So I chose, like you, the highest paying
Great
one.
job, yeah.
And I ended up with, making my first check was a $3,800 check after taxes. That was my first Canadian back in 1988.
Probably amazing.
It was amazing to me. I'd never seen that much money in one place in my entire life, right? So, so I chose a job with, at the time, I was going to go up, and I had accepted 2 job offers, one with Suncor up in Fort McMurray, which would mean me living up in Fort McMurray, which I wasn't all that keen on. It was an excellent, it paid more money at the time than Interprovincial Pipeline, right? Which became Enbridge. So I went ahead and just declined that job and accepted the job with in town again, right? All the advantages of being in town with IPL at the time, right? And, just small team, working, working in the head office and in the tank farm in Edmonton. And eventually somebody realized that I could speak Spanish, and they sent me to first to Brazil, and then to Colombia, then to Venezuela, and then I kind of was on loan to a combined company that was Ocensa in Colombia. So I kind of started traveling all over the world, right, for a number of years, assisting in building remote terminal stations, pipeline, the control systems for the pipelines, etc.
So it's interesting, Oz, and it's all starting to come together for me. So one of the themes that we've heard from some of the people we've talked to, specifically that started or had a good portion of their years working in Latin America, is the cultural differences that exist between the directness, maybe is the wrong way to say it, or the language, the tone, the delivery, maybe the tone in their voice, how loud or soft spoken they are. And so for almost everybody that came from Latin America, 5, 6, 7 years, were successful in that world, and they've come into to work in the U.S., they've had to go through a readjustment and they get coaching on, hey, you're being too aggressive. Hey, you don't have to use that tone. Hey, why are you abrasive? Maybe even that word. I'm kind of curious because you spent a lot of time working in Latin America. Did you, as you transition into working for American companies, did you have similar themes or struggles?
Always, Amazon and the early formative years of Amazon. And, like if you take a look at transition from oil field, and this goes to all the kids out there, right? I used to tell the people at Amazon when I was asked to run their data center environment in 2001, whether I'd, manage critical facilities, right? And I went home and I asked the person that offered me a job, I said, give me 24 hours to think about this. I don't want to give you a yes. I want to see if I have the tools for this job. I went home and I thought to myself, you worked in offshore oil rigs. If something goes wrong in an offshore oil rig, it couldn't be more critical than that, because everybody dies. If you got 50 people and the thing goes up in flames, you're all done. You're up in the North Sea. You've got an emergency. Your generators go offline. You lose power. You lose fuel. You're done. So I went back and I thought, I could work in critical facilities, because if anything happens here, there's still, a chance that somebody may get hurt. But I mean, if you walk into a clean room or a data center, or even an electrical room in a data center, or a generator enclosure in a data center, you're going to eat off the floor. They're that clean. Right? Electricians, mechanics, they fight to provide services to data center operators because it is such a clean environment. So I thought, I can live here. Like I lived with muck up to my waist. I've seen pipes slide down the side of a hill in Colombia, take out 17 people on the way down, etc. It's like, this has nothing to do. So I went back to the individual. I said, I think I could do this. Right? So everybody out there, remember, right? If you're working in a manufacturing plant, if you're designing life support systems, if you're designing anything that involves, right, like there's a high degree of human harm that can come, you can work in critical facilities.
That's such a very interesting point. On the operations side, where I work, and there's a big push to hire people coming out of the Navy, specifically the Navy nuke program, because they describe it the same way. Like when you're in your submarine and you're so many feet under the ocean, like a mistake's going to kill everybody. Doesn't get any credit, including yourself. Like it doesn't get any more critical than the life of your fellow Navy team members are on the line. And so that translates incredibly well into our world. So
And you know, like again, and going back to the question, right? So Amazon in the formative years was data driven, and I called it the broken toy store, right? Like I remember that initially growing, one of the fellows that I worked with, he was the night attendant at a 7-Eleven by the fulfillment center in Seattle, and we needed somebody that was semi-smart running the IT. So one of my coworkers went to grab coffee for all of us as we were burning the midnight oil in the Seattle, one of the first fulfillment center for Amazon, and he offered the guy a job. He goes, "What are you making?" He goes, "I'm making $9 an hour." And he said, "You want to make 12? Come work for us." He goes, "Does it have to be right now?" He goes, "No, how about tomorrow night?" So the guy just on the spot told his boss that he quit, went from working to 7-Eleven, and now he's a big musician, and he has a big sound studio in Delaware, right? So the formative years at Amazon, you spoke what was in your mind. So to me, I thought it was, being the first. I thought, this is amazing, right? I mean, if it comes to mind, you throw it out there, and no one, tells you about microaggression or how, because there isn't, like we're Latin, right? There's no microaggression. If you're going to be aggressive, it's not going to be passive aggressive. Yeah. It's like, I want to tell you this, and take it or leave it. Advice is free. Use it for what it's worth, right? So Amazon in the early years was a company where I felt like, wow, everybody has a voice, because everybody did have a voice, right? And eventually over time, it turned so much not into it, right? And it really depended on the group that you were working. I had some fantastic leaders at Amazon. I'm going to call them out by name: Rick Braun, Jay Littlepage, and my favorite, Jerry Hunter, right? And those people, I mean, they made sure that they were inclusive in every one of their presentations, all hands, etc. They listened to everybody. Jerry Hunter would sit down and somebody would be going off, on a complete tangent, and he would allow the individual to finish whatever it had to say. The patience of a saint. Learned so much from that, man.
That's fantastic.
And and slowly, eventually, it started becoming more and more corporate, less data. Microaggression became a term. So my time was I could see my time quickly running out, right? So I left. I did a bunch of odd jobs for much money as I worked with companies to try to get them on the I call it cloud roadmap. Work a little bit for NVIDIA. Horrible. NVIDIA was a good company. Vlad Troy was my boss at the time, and then my mother passed away, and I was when I kind of left, I worried about what I was doing. I kind of left the Edmonton family behind. So I had a tremendous amount of guilt when that happened. My mother passed away. I left NVIDIA. I knew that eventually I was going to end up at Microsoft anyway once my NDA ran out. So I went, had it was kind of a little bit of a contentious, when she passed away, she left, there was a lot of issues that were left over that we had to clean up. So we did that. Moved on, started working for Microsoft. And at that point, right, I was, investigated almost weekly for something I said or one of my behaviors and stuff. It was really, really tough, right? I learned a lot, right? A great company, but I was used to the Amazon data-driven decisions, and that quite wasn't it over there, right? So for me, I could definitely see how the corporate culture, I'm not going to say softer, but more, less paying attention what the data is telling you and more paying attention to behaviors. And, for me, I think that the rule of thumb is say anything, but don't disrespect. Right. And it should be a two-way street, right? If we're going to have a chat, or if we're going to say, hey, I don't believe what you're saying, you've got to be, and this is what I learned from Microsoft, you've got to be really well balanced in how you say things, and for fear of not making sure you don't hurt anybody's feelings. However, right, there's an easy way for you to fall over the cliff. And in order not to go through the hard avenue, is not say anything, right? And when the crowd gets quiet is when bad things happen.
100%. You know, I'm curious. I'll just go back a little bit. Your move from oil and gas into Amazon. Obviously, Amazon wasn't what it was now. Like, what was it going through your mind of? I mean, I'm assuming by this point, oil and gas, you had great position, great pay, probably could have stayed in that industry the rest of your career to transition into what was Amazon a startup? Was that a fair assessment at the time, or were they a little bit more than that at that time?
They were just coming over the startup, going into a real company, right? So I caught them right at the you know, like, we're gonna go and you still, you know, for us, an example, I tell folks, my first Christmas at Amazon, I love Fords, I love cars, too many. And I had a red 1991 Cobra limited edition, only manufactured in Canada, right? So I'm driving this thing around Seattle, and we're at the fulfillment center because everybody did everything, right? So you're packaging, and, you know, one of the guys said, "Hey, it's Christmas Eve. We're working through Christmas Eve." They're going, what are you driving? And I said, hatchback Mustang. You know, it's like, how many packages can you fit in? Right? And we agreed to some number of packages. So my car is packed with packages on my way home from the fulfillment center.
To drop them off
in West Seattle, where I lived, and do hand deliveries before Christmas. Like, I mean, you take a look at it and you go, that's kind of like brutal. It was great.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yes.
You know, the next year, you know, because I was running critical facilities, we're manning the customer helplines, right? So during our day job, every now and again, you take an hour, and the direct calls to your, you know, you ended up learning what the people were seeing, and that gave you such an insight into what you were doing, and whether, you know, you take a look at it and you go, oh, it's corporate BS. It actually does make you appreciate what you're doing. It's little stuff, but at the end of the day, for somebody, it's really big stuff. I was making about $250,000 a year when I moved from the oil field to Amazon. I took a pay cut to $72,000 a year, plus a bunch of stock that was worth nothing at the time. Would never, ever, ever do anything different. If I was proposed with the same deal, right, I would do the exact same thing, because it just allowed me, like, you know, the oil field, like one of the things that we said, the oil field is really like a nuclear sub, right? You got to do everything by the book, right? The data center world, innovation, if you don't innovate, you're dead, right? You are absolutely dead, right? I took Amazon from 2 data centers to 201 globally, right? I saw construction everywhere, including, you know, in Japan, with some very, very great engineers in Japan, by the way, some super creative seismic stabilization for large buildings. I mean, the stuff that they were doing was incredible, right? Without innovation, if your choice is, I'm going to decide whether I build or I use a third party to build on my behalf, if you cannot build, right, with your existing employer, you're dead in the water. You are absolutely dead in the water, because you bring in no innovation for anything that's coming into the future. And you know what? If you stay within, within very loose swim lanes, you can create, you can innovate, you can build. Something you cannot do in the nuclear industry, in the oil and gas industry, in the vehicle industry. God, you know, a few years ago, the car companies had to go through a big disclosures to the DOT just for them to accept LEDs on the cars.
Of course, yeah.
You'll remember that, right? So it was a big deal, because those cars couldn't be they're 10 years ahead of their time, and it's like, these absolutely make sense. Yeah, you have to prove to a lot of folks that don't understand that they work, and that they're going to they're going to be the future.
Did you know any of? I mean, what you just said makes complete sense, just from a innovation perspective. From it's an area in an industry where it's not regulated like other places are, and so it's left to the ability of the company and the individuals that comprise of it to innovate and change and be forward thinking. Was any of that in your thought process when you were making your decision? Or, like, I'm trying to get as, like, and the reason I asked the question is there's so many times we've had conversations with our listeners, like the Latin culture is very loyal culture, and it's very one of those where leaving a company and going and chasing another opportunity, it's a huge decision. And I'm kind of curious to get your thought. One, what was your state of mind of thinking through making a change, because you had grown, you'd making great money, to shifting? And then what advice would you give those to, like, when is it time for somebody to be like, okay, like I've done my time, I'm ready to kind of go change, just like chase that next opportunity? How would you answer that?
It's for me, it was taking a risk. I had no idea that this world was going to open up for me, right? And this world's been very good to me. It's always very good to me. NVIDIA was very good to me. Digital realty was incredible to me, right? And Microsoft was good to me. I mean, like at the end of the day, I learned. If I walk at the end of every day and I learn something, I'm definitely right on the plus side of that day, right? And right now, when I'm working at Denvr Dataworks, I mean, it's a Canadian company, so you walk in and you want to talk diversity. Go work for a Canadian company for 2 minutes and you're going to see diversity like you didn't know it existed. And I'm appreciating that now. My thought was, I was just kind of tired of doing the same thing. It was mundane, right? Like, like it's like, hey, listen, I want to try, we worked on a lot of cool things in the oil field trying to optimize oil throughput. So we were getting creative until things like the Department of Transport got involved, or the Transportation Safety Board. And then you were put on reverse as far as innovation is concerned. I was tired of that, right? Like, I want to go into something where, you know what it was? I had no idea. A friend of mine, Kirk Hufeld, dragged me in and he gave me a call, right? And he said, listen, you've come, you've interviewed. Everybody was highly, highly inclined in hiring you. You're at the top of the pile. You come now or you don't come at all. Right. So he did that in October. Right. And then I said, so I told my boss, hey, I'm going to leave. Right. Here's my 2 weeks notice. Right. And he wouldn't accept it. Right. Like, I mean, it's like, I'm not accepting this. It's like, how do you not accept the resignation? It's beyond me. So I drove down with open mind, open expectations. I came in, drove from Calgary to Seattle, and in my red Mustang with, my important stuff, ski gear, hockey equipment, and some clothes. I looked at the price of clothes in the US and I said, I can buy anything I need. I just need, like a week's worth of clothes, yeah. My ski gear, my hockey gear, and I'm set, right? I don't need anything else. And with that being said, right, I had no expectations, and best move I made. I'd make it 1,000 times.
You were early 30s at that time. I'm trying to get the gauge. So you were early 30s. You moved to Seattle. At the time, how big is Amazon of a company?
Well, it was in Seattle. It was pretty big. Okay. Right. At the time, we had 2 fulfillment centers, standing up a third in Sparks, Nevada. Right. And so in Seattle, it was a big deal. Right. I remember people walking around with their blue badges flashing at restaurants and stuff.
Like,
right.
It was like the place to work.
It was a place to work in Seattle. Then I would look at it and go, my God, you guys are like just hemorrhaging cash. You're not going to survive. Right. And somebody paid attention of how conscious I was to finances and effectively put me in a position where I was trying to reduce a bleed out in costs. Right. So I started managing projects like customer service, trying to collapse the footprint. Something more manageable in places other than Seattle or New York for customer service centers where we could maybe leverage some college students and whatnot, right? So and at that point, right, you say, hey, I was a hand in glove fit because you had to be direct to have those conversations. You had to have the data, right? As a Latino, right? Both things admit you make a decision because we're actually we are emotional and we are very passionate, but we also make our decisions based on history. Like we look in our rearview mirror and we say, this is the way we're going to drive forward. And I am committed to going this way. Right. So very data driven. So for me, being direct and using data to prove your point was heaven sent. I've never seen that before.
Did you find yourself as going through Amazon early 30s? I believe you hit director like 35, 36, somewhere in that range. Was that normal I compare it to my world, it was very young. And so I was curious to see if that was normal back then or if that was just what was happening during those days.
It was very normal back then. right? And the reason that it was normal was because you got to remember, I was the elder, right? Everybody was in their early 20s, right? So everybody was coming in from college. Everybody
You were the adult in the room.
Yeah, I was the last one. There was a graduate, they hired some super, I was probably the bottom of the class when it came to the people that they brought in, right? And everybody made director ahead of me. So I was actually one of the very last ones in that graduating class for Amazon that made director, right? And I think a lot of it, like, I mean, I know my temperament, and I know sometimes I don't, like I tend to speak out, and, it's not necessarily what people want to hear, which means I'm going to go and I'm going to be put in the back of the classroom until I get called
penalty
up.
Box. Yeah, we put in the penalty box.
I spent a lot of time in the penalty box.
Okay, fair enough.
And so eventually, but to me, and the funny thing, right, was because they took really good care of me financially, right? So I had no idea. So when I got moved up from senior manager to director, I took a pay cut because a senior manager, I was, like about 130 percentile of compensation, and then director brought me down. So it was like, what happened here? But, you did, with that title, you were able to do an awful lot more. And to say nothing, when I got to VP, I mean, you have so much, you are effectively running your own P&L, right? And that was exciting.
How big? So if we were to stick with Amazon for a second, at peak in your career, how many people were under you?
Thousands.
Looking back, how, this maybe an introspective question for you. I was like, at what point did you know, like, people were talking to you, maybe being polite, nice to you because of the title that you carried versus that's how they are? Like, how would you, I feel like, I've heard a lot of leaders make the comment, the higher you go, the lonelier it gets. How did you balance that? So
I've had some great mentors. One of those mentors was a fellow by the name of Brian Valentine, right? And Brian Valentine, if you look at Tommy Boy videos with Steve Ballmer, he's Tommy Boy and Steve Ballmer, right? So this is a guy who left home, Centralia, Washington, when he was 17, made his career, became like super successful at Microsoft, and then moved over to Amazon. And he told me, my first mentoring session with him is we sat on Lake South Lake Union in Seattle watching planes land, and one of the planes is taking off. It's coming right to the building, and it pulls away. Now, my first mentoring session, he goes, "Have you ever thought what happens if the pilot has a medical emergency
or a bad day?"
Yeah. I go, "No, but thanks for bringing it up, Brian. I understand." So he told me, he says, leadership is the ultimate in lonely places. You will hear what people think you want to hear, and people will not act on what they tell you. And you have to be super cognizant of that, right? And I fooled myself when I became director at Amazon. That's exactly what happened. People would try to put, I've always considered myself a very transparent individual. And, when I became director at Amazon, people would tell you exactly what they thought you wanted to hear.
100%.
And it became frustrating because I always thought of myself as a leader of the people. I'm going to go out there, I'm going to help. When I went to data centers, I would roll up my sleeves and I would install servers, but I was the same individual, say the week before, and the treatment changed like that. And to this day, I do not understand. Like if I, and I've tried the approach with some leaders where I tell them, hey, listen, right? First of all, I always think that I give my leaders some advice from what the people are thinking, right? And of course, the emperor has no clothes is the one that people have to be cognizant of. Some leaders choose to take a look at that, Jerry Hunter, and say, okay, I've got a problem. If people are telling me what I want to hear all the time, I need to get to the bottom of it, right? And he used different mechanisms to make sure that he extracted the truth from everybody. Other leaders choose to not listen, and they like to hear the emotional, the emotional, and a lot of leaders make their decisions based on incorrect data and emotions, and that's when you see an entire organization, because if, like positive feedback, right? If that, if this helps, then I'm going to continue doing it. And I'm going to continue doing it when the leader gets so far away from the truth and the reality on the ground, that what you're being told or the way that you're receiving, and you choose not to hear advice being given to you, you're done. That organization will be like, it'll have a best before date, guaranteed. I've seen it over and over and over again.
So, as I'm curious to ask the question, and I'll word it this way. Let's just assume I was a young 20-something-year-old at Amazon, and I was 3 or 4 layers under you, and you're the VP, and obviously people treat you and they carry you in that regard. If I was in that position where it's like, man, there's the only other Latino in the company happens to be the VP. I want to reach out. I want to say hi. I want to just pick your brain. Is that something that you would, what advice would you give to that 20-something-year-old person right now that maybe sees the people that they resonate with, maybe somebody that they want to reach out to, but they're in a position where maybe to them it seems daunting, or perhaps super nervous to even reach out? How would you give that advice? Because what I heard you say is you love to hear feedback from those that are doing the work, but not everybody's like that. So how would you, what guidance would you give those that are listening?
I think look for the telling signs, right? If the leader seems very approachable, they likely are, right? One of the key, I never, both at Amazon, at Microsoft, right? NVIDIA, nobody has offices, it's all open floor plan, but the offices, never would I keep an office door closed. If I needed a meeting with somebody that was private, with HR or whatever, legal, I would use a conference room for that meeting. But my office door was always open. I always had treats. I always had, a La Crue, I guess, or La Croix, however you pronounce it. Yeah. And I would have beer sometimes, and a little bit of, I would make sure that if invited, I would attend the functions that I was invited. Right, my last day, my last day when I eventually left Microsoft, the engineering team had a little bit of a party. They had a party every Friday night, and I hadn't shared broadly that I was leaving. My boss knew. They wanted to really control the message because I was probably one of the we had Latinos are 2-3% of the upper management population on the base. Yeah. It's 20% of the workers. So they were really trying to manage the message. So I went in and had a drink with the entire engineering team, and slowly Andrea Woodland's office, it's where we actually had all our Friday night parties, started growing and growing. And eventually we had a couple dozen people just having, what they didn't know was that was my last drink with them.
It's interesting you say that. My last day, I spent 9 years at Google, and I left for about a year, and I've come back. But when I left, I had no inclination that I would be coming back. That last day, there was a big party that they threw as a surprise. They had mariachis, and
oh wow,
it was fantastic. It was one of those where it was incredibly hard not to get emotional, because you don't know what you don't know. You put yourself in a perspective, and that was really cool. So it's interesting hearing it from the other perspective, where you knew, but a lot of the colleagues didn't know that was the last hurrah, if you will. Okay, so you mentioned looking for signs, looking to see if they're approachable, reaching out.
And reach out. You'll be amazed, right? Again, all the people that I've talked to, right? I've had one-on-one time with the likes of Andy Jassy. I never received those opportunities at Microsoft, but Amazon, I had an open door. And they're very approachable people, right? And they listen, and they actually listen. Right. And you can see, because if you pay attention to them, if they, sometimes you can tell it goes in one out the ear, and they feign interest. A lot of these folks, the Jerry Hunters, Charlie Bells of the world, they listen. They actually listen. They sit down and they don't just hear you, they listen. And you see it, because if you pay attention, eventually, if what you said was meaningful, and you have to, you have to take a look in the mirror and say, does this really matter? If it does, they listen.
I want to pull in on something, because a lot of our listeners on this podcast are also people that are not Hispanic or Latino, but they're allies, and they potentially are managing Hispanic and Latinos, and they're wanting to, or they work for Hispanic or Latino manager. I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts on what are the traits or the things that you've seen and you've been offered by great managers that they did. Like, what were those things that they did that enabled you to be you, show up to work, do what you do your way, and enabled you to be successful? But it was because your managers that you had were doing either supporting you or giving you that coaching. I'm kind of curious if those that are listening that maybe aren't Latino or Hispanic, but they're an ally and they want to help, what advice would you give them on empowering their people?
I think, see where they're coming from, right? Not every, take a look at where they're from, their directness, right? It may be, as in our case, cultural, right? Give them the space and time, right? For them to send the message, right? And if the message isn't what you were expecting, or the message is like, talk to them, right? Like, just say, hey, listen, for example, hey, everybody treats me poorly. It's like, okay, why do you think everybody treats you poorly? Because, they do this and that and that. It's like, okay, well, how are we reacting to your perception that you're being treated poorly, right? Is it something that perhaps maybe it's a two-way street? You give the people the time of day and they need to give you the time of day. And when it comes time to become directive, do it, right? Like, just say, listen, my expectation of you is going to be, you need to get along with your people. Right. And you need to, if you expect for them to listen to you, you've got to listen to them. Right. So meet in the middle. It's always a 50% race. Right. Make sure you meet in the middle. Right. Just most of the leaders that I've actually just thinking through this on the fly, Alfonso, most of the leaders that I have, followed are Caucasian. Right, the University of Arizona, a University of Texas. They're very open-minded, but the one trait that they all have is that they really know what to say and when to say. We had a tough, we were taking a lot of shortcuts at Amazon the early years because we're really controlling cost, right? And, we had a number of issues at the data centers where, because I've always been hands-on, I've been right there to figure it out. And we had a pretty tough problem on one of our Virginia data centers that I couldn't figure out an answer, right? And at the time, Jay Littlepage, I think it was Jay Littlepage. It was either him or Jerry Hunter. They both came from Sun Systems. So sometimes I tend to confluke who told me what to do when, and I told them. And we'd been working for 3 days trying to troubleshoot this electrical problem, and it was 1 o'clock in the morning. We're still at the data center. I called them and I said, "Hey, listen, I'm having a tough time." He said, "Okay, rest." Right? You're not going to do anything at 1 o'clock. I don't want any of you getting hurt. But by tomorrow morning, you must have this problem solved. Right? Sleep on it. Think about it. This is a problem with the physical systems, and you're the best at, figuring these problems out. So when you come back in this morning, you're going to sit down, you're going to whiteboard your solution. He's in Seattle, I'm in Virginia, and you're going to have this thing fixed. And it's interesting because it's like, are you asking the impossible? No, everything that he asked was within the limits. But he'd set a limit, or saying, for me, he set a limit. Hey, listen, this is what you're going to be doing. Right. And at the time, I think there was a manager between myself and I think it was Jay. So he gave me exactly what I needed to hear at that point. Rest, come back with fresh mind, because now you're
mush. Yeah.
And you're going to solve it. And that's exactly what happened. And I was about to call in consultants, and I was about to call in contractors to help me fix the problem. I'm Mike Zamora, good friend and mentor, and I figured it out, doing exactly what he told us to do. We sat down, the two of us walked through, and we said, we think this is where the problem is.
And that's what it was. Fantastic. Okay. It's interesting. I 100% relate. The best managers I've ever had, the ones that have given me the opportunities in some cases where I probably didn't deserve the opportunities, have all been Caucasian. And so they've just, It's just they treated everybody fairly. They treated everybody with respect. They knew how to pool the strengths of all their individual team members and just kind of put them together in a cohesive team. And so when you get to the point where the team feels like a family, that's when you know you're doing something right.
And the team will give you great results when they know their voices are being truly heard, right? Because you have to walk the talk. A lot of folks do not, right? If you dig deeper in, comparatively, it's the leaders that walk the talk, right? And they underwrite your decisions. And they're not always the right decision. And some of the decisions are horrible. But they wrote an insurance policy behind you underwriting the risk. And those are the managers that end up getting the most out of their employees, regardless of where they come from and regardless of diversity of the team.
That's deep. That resonates with me tremendously. So I appreciate you sharing that. So I want to just continue with this journey. So we get to a point now, you're at Amazon 15 years. I'm trying to get the 16 years at Amazon. And so you make a decision to leave, and you go a year. You spent a little bit of time.
18 months.
NVIDIA and
Digital Realty. And then you make the transition to Microsoft. What was that transition like? What was the kind of walk me through your headspace of one to the other to eventually landed where you landed at Microsoft for 5 or 6 years? I wanted to work on Microsoft with a good friend of mine, Christian Bellotti, right? And my goal was for us to put a patent together and have both our names on a patent, and we achieved that goal, right? And that was, I just wanted to do that, right? But over time, I came to realize, right? I learned so much, right? And I believe I learned how to be a better person, but it wasn't the environment for me because I like to win. I don't like to come in second, right? And sometimes winning means you're going to have to work out a little harder. If you don't have the natural talent, you're going to be spending an awful lot more time at the gym, doing your reps, whatever it is, right? And I just felt that, my willingness to try to become hyper competitive required probably more time and more patience than I had.
Is that just because the company grew to the place where you knew like your skill sets and your approach were perhaps better served somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, my skill set is if we come in the middle with a company, I do think I bring a substantial skill set to the table.
100%.
I'm super innovative, right? And I think in my mind that I can solve any problem that's put in front of me, right? Sometimes there's a wake during problem solving, and I think that can be a bit of a problem, right? It became a problem at Amazon, became a problem at Microsoft. I'm damn sure that it doesn't become a problem at Denver DataWorks, right? Because I mean, it's a small crew, it's a good crew, super diverse. However, I just realized that I just have to tap the brakes on my hyper. When I get into a mood, and often friends and of course loving mates have said that I have a countdown clock, and when I'm playing hockey, because as it's been said, it always by Ange, it always comes down to hockey. When they see me coming off the ice, if there's been an incident,
they know
they know that the next shift is going to be fireworks, right? So I'm actually beginning to tap that down and decide that maybe the next shift I'm not going to take. And I've done it now a couple of times where I've been super hot under the collar, and I've just ask the coach to just bench me for the next couple of shifts until I bring my boiling blood down to a good temperature, right? So again, for me, I've learned, and I think, and that's probably the biggest lesson I took away from Microsoft is there's time to just throw the car in neutral and coast.
You made a comment there, and I've never put two and two together, and I'm doing it in my head now. But obviously your sport of choice is hockey. And so I'm kind of curious, like if based on what I'm hearing, it absolutely fits your personality to a T. And I'm kind of curious, like for me, I grew up playing football and I also wrestled. It was one of those where like you had to be super like wrestling as your skill increases, you start to flow. It's what they call flow, and it becomes more mental than it is physical. And that always, for me, kind of correlated to who I was, like career-wise, personality-wise. So I'm kind of curious, like hockey, your personality at work, like how would you feel that they're correlated together? Like
they probably are, at work, for me, in school, grades always came easy. I just got it, right? Like, and I would always know what was on a test and always was fortunate, right? So I could always do good without trying very hard. Sports, particularly in hockey, right? Like I remember I was just saying that when we walked to school, I'd have my stick, my gloves, and my skates at 6 o'clock in the morning in Edmonton, Alberta, and we'd throw all our equipment over the fence. We'd climb it. A friend of mine and I, we'd clean up our little bit of ice. We'd take our pucks out and we'd play in this little bit of ice that we cleaned out. And 7:30, 7:45, we'd do the same thing in reverse and continue walking to school and put all our stuff. So very much like work, right? When you get into a mood and you decide, I'm going to do this. First of all, do what you say you're going to do, right? Like that is the entry level, right? So in hockey, if you say, I'm going to go out there and, I fought a lot, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make sure that this player and I leave the ice together, right? Opposing team, which means something is going to happen. In my professional life, right? Like, I actually enjoy doing the work. I enjoy doing the heavy lifting. I enjoy doing the research, right? So in order to become better is who is going to be more focused in developing those skills, right? And those are two things, right? I think that for me, hockey allowed me to improve at my pace and to spend the time that I wanted to spend. And if I knew that if I could do an hour more a day than the next individual over,
you'd be that much better.
I'd be that much better. Same thing in work. If I can work a little bit harder, a little bit smarter, right? A beauty about where I work now is that, like everybody works whatever hours they work, but everybody works hard, right? So for me, if I feel like just sitting down on a Saturday night and cranking out a bunch of stuff for work, that's exactly what I'm going to do on Saturday night, right? So it's all, your success is reflective of your effort. To me, a place becomes extremely, or a sport, and you'll probably agree with this, becomes extremely unsatisfying when your efforts don't reflect, when your rewards don't reflect your efforts.
100%, not 1,000%. I feel like that's when you start to get disenchanted too, and you start to get disengaged the more and more, because you're not rewarded for the effort that you're putting in. So no, 100% us.
And another thing here, and I've noticed this as I go through, and I got to share the learning that I shared with you last night. I've got a great team. It's a small team at Denver, and we're using, I'm punching up. We're using interns. We got interns that are turning to full-time positions, right? Love interns because you start with a blank canvas, right? And if you want to put a Rembrandt on it, that's exactly what you do. That's the way I see interns. It is a blank canvas with a ton of infectious energy that they bring to the table.
Yeah, I would assume you guys are also learning a lot from them, just in the context of like technology and what's happening in the world, and like there has to be a two-way street there. Like,
absolutely is, and I apologize if I actually don't bring that to the table, because they're bringing. I'm 1,000 years old, right? Like, I've been around this industry forever, right? And these folks that are coming in, right? They're coming in with innovative ideas, and that's the beauty of it, right? And let's say it's not a Rembrandt; it's a Rembrandt that you both can paint together, right? Yeah, so I love the energy that they bring. So I'm talking to an individual. His name's Vishal, and we want to put an intern to work with him, right? And he asked me, he's like, well, what's the intern going to do? And I said, well, it's whatever you want the intern to do. I said, this is what delegation looks like, right? If you think, I said, it's easy for you because you're a great engineer. It's easy for you to think that you can do it all, and you probably can do it all. But I think you're going to run hours in a day to do it all, right? So you have to be smart, and you have to be very specific in how you assign those. They're here to learn. So it's okay. Like if there's a job that you may not enjoy doing or that you may not have time to do, it's okay to delegate, right? But at the end of the day, what I don't want you to do is, if it's not the job that you would have done, because it's not you doing the job, right? It's the job that the intern will do for you, right? It's the job that they did, which means you've got to be able to support the individual. If you don't like it, you ease off or on. Say, hey, maybe we need to try this a little bit of a different way. Like, great job. I love what you did. I don't understand what you did, right? So maybe we can go work together for a different outcome. And I said, that's going to be twice as difficult on you. But if you do this right, 4 months from now, you're not going to have to worry about it. That individual is going to do maybe not the exact same job you will do, because that'll never happen, but maybe they'll do a better job.
I might do it better. Yeah, I might get to the point where it actually looks better.
So he's like, okay. I said, but if you ask me, like, what's this individual going to do for me? That's not for me to answer. It's like, what do you want this individual to do for you? Right? That's leadership.
That's one of the hardest lessons I've ever had to learn, is the ability to be able to delegate effectively. It's a tough thing to do. One of my managers gave me a book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, star. And a fantastic book. It literally talks about, like, at some point you have to learn and just let go and learn to. But I feel like the more alpha personality, type A type personality that you are, the harder that is.
My recommendation for a lot of these folks is do what my leaders have done for me, which is they've underwritten an insurance policy. Write that insurance policy. And I mean, literally write the insurance policy, like say all the things that you're willing to stand behind the person you're delegating to, and the things that you're not. Right? And agree with the individual. Like, it's almost like a contract between you and them, and you are adhered to making sure, right, that you both succeed. Because often what I see, and one of the things that I hate about companies, it's always the shiny object. How I can bring somebody better from the outside to do a job that I could. For me, every time I brought in a leader, right, from the outside, I think it's cost me more effort and time, and I've taken many steps back into whatever the goal has been. For me, I prefer to promote and hire internally, right? Work them, because you will have compressed that learning curve a substantial amount. And a lot of companies always think that the shiny object is outside the company.
You made an interesting point there, and I'm curious to dig in a little bit into that. Because it got into, I do want to hear the story again. I think it'd be great for the listeners of your. You shared a story yesterday when we were at dinner about a friend of yours that just immigrated from El Salvador and just had an amazing story of how they made their way into the data center space. I want to get into that, but it relates to that in the sense of, at times, if you promote somebody from an internal that may be on paper, or maybe if an outsider, a third party, is just looking at the internal candidate and maybe that shiny candidate from the outside, on paper, it's a smart decision to go with maybe the shiny object. But the thing that you can't measure is the grit and the appreciation that the person that was just afforded that opportunity to step up is going to have in appreciation of the company choosing to promote from internal, giving somebody maybe a stretch opportunity to grow into the position. Like, kind of walk me through the thought process there, because I feel like there's a lot of the people that we've talked to, there's this culture. Latin people are very proud, and they're very loyal, and they're very humble. And what I mean by that is, like, they're not going to be the one that's raising their hand to say, hey, I want that opportunity, man. I know it's open. Like, please consider me. Like, they're going to sit back, and kind of general theme is they're going to wait for them to come to me and say, hey, Alfonso, I think you're ready for this next step. Were you interested in applying? And so I'm kind of curious, like, you mentioned hiring from internal is what you prioritize. Kind of what advice would you give those that are listening about, like, they're seeing those opportunities that are maybe open? Do they sit back and just wait for them to get tapped on the shoulder? Do you express interest? How would you navigate those waters? Because there's something there. I agree wholeheartedly with you. And I'm kind of curious how that translates into advice you'd give people.
For me, I guess being typical, I'm not atypical, but typical Latin. It's very difficult for me to even receive a compliment, right? Like often I hear from, Ange, just say thank you. Right. Don't be literal. So for me, self-promoting, and this is a huge problem in the Latin community, right? And I don't think that we should change, right? Because humility is a very, to me, humility is not bowing your head down and receiving what's coming your way, but it's like moving on to the next thing quickly, right? The way I see it, and we kind of talked about this, and we'll go to the story and the individual whom I have high regard for because of what he has gone through and where he's come, to the point that he has come. And I use him as an example often. But if you take a look at even when I'm hiring, right, I take a look at, first of all, of course, the name is going to attract attention, and I do think that a diverse workplace is necessary, right? And it's got to be diverse, and it can't be just checkmarked. You got to really live it. So if you take a look at even in the I call it grades from university or a technical college or whatever, right? If you see somebody who perhaps for whatever reason they catch your attention, right, and suddenly their grades aren't horrible, they're not great, they're above average, right, and you start kind of digging into the person's life story a little bit. Right. And just stay within, interviewing backgrounds. You'll often realize that the diverse community, where it's Latin and otherwise, right, often they don't have access to the kind of benefits that others might. Student loans, to hell, they may be illegal. They may be in this country, haven't come across, and not, through the expected way, right? So they may be in there. They may be working one or two jobs. They may be going to school full time. They are, as a matter of fact, right? So you realize when you see this above average grades that they might have cranked out on top of having to work, having to, support a family sometimes, right? So for me, that is 100% the individual that you want to hire because of the traits they bring: humility, loyalty. They'll never say no to a job. Right? Nothing is below them. So they're not coming in, in Latin America. One of the things I hate is, everybody's a doctor in Colombia, regardless of the, education. It's like, you don't need a PhD to be a doctor. Everybody has a university education is a doctor, right? So that goes to the humility of ascending yourself to a different level. You hire these folks and they are incredibly innovative. They're incredibly hardworking, and they're not going to say no to work. Right? Internally, it's the same deal, right? So often you may have somebody in a starting position where, they may be at the beginning of a career. They may be a little bit older. So the career doesn't sum where their career doesn't sum where they should be. It's because they might have gone back to school, which is often the case, or they might have been raising a family while going to school and getting that degree or that post-secondary education, right? So suddenly you've got an individual that somehow managed to raise kids, have a wife or husband, family, right? Went to school and is now part of your a part of your team, right? Take a look at those people because they bring so much to the table. And they're not going to be looking for shortcuts because their whole life hasn't been a shortcut.
Hasn't been a shortcut, 1,000%. I'm curious that's so insightful. I appreciate that. I'm kind of curious to dive into the story just a little bit because it kind of goes into the grit aspect of it. You're sharing an individual that immigrated here from El Salvador. He got here through trains, right, and walking. I don't want to give it justice, so I'd love for you to kind of just have the listeners kind of listen to kind of just an example of like the type of grit and determination that a lot of people in this that come from backgrounds similar to maybe our listeners go through.
Yeah, so this individual, I have high regard for him, and I came from. And if you start doing the checks, you'll eventually know who it is. I'll share the name with you. I won't share it in this blog. He is, I do have a blog, and yeah, I have called him out several times because his story is amazing. So he walked, trained, busted from El Salvador to the border, crossed into the U.S. He's legal now. went to university. He had $52, I think, in his pocket, right? His family gathered together for him to come in, went to university in Massachusetts, right? Got an engineering degree, right? Did it all, while working, while living with friends, while couch surfing, right? And this individual, became an engineer, legalized himself in the U.S., right? He did it all through hard work. And he was, I think, 17 when he crossed the border.
Wow.
Right. So again, right, he had good grades, not, they weren't top of his class grades, but when you see what he went through to get to where he needed to work, if it doesn't take a look and going, wow, I want 1,000 of you working for me.
100%.
Because I can move mountains with that kind of effort, right? This individual, I have all the time in the world for him. Every time we go to Virginia, we meet at Barcelona, which is a bar. We have our tapas and have a couple of whiskeys, and away we go.
There you
right?
go.
And the individual, I feel honored that he always has time for me. Right. Whenever I call him, and if I don't call him, he's like, hey, you didn't call me. Where are you at? Right. So he followed me from Microsoft, from Amazon to Microsoft. And then he went and did it. He's doing his own thing, working in Virginia right now. And I hope that someday you'll hear from him. And
I'm hoping we have him on this podcast. So if you're listening, I'd love to have you on here. I think the part that resonated with me out of the whole story is when you said, when you were considering hiring him, and you kind of heard the story and you're like, I don't need to hear anything else. I'm going to hire you.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what's the process? You were like, well, look, I'm in this position. I can do what I want. I'm going to hire you. And so that absolutely resonated with me, because it goes to show there's much more depth into people, more than just what shows on paper.
So much, right? There's so many, do not underestimate people, right? And when we have one outside just watching our podcast, right? Late starter in life, I'm awesome project manager, right? Do not underestimate people, just because maybe they're not boisterous, they don't self-promote, that there will be a human being under there that is just amazing. Amazing.
1,000% us. I'm kind of curious. Okay, there's a couple more themes that I want to cover. So you go to Microsoft, you spend 5 years there, and then you go to your new company, Denvr Dataworks.
No, I went to Digital Realty first.
Oh, for a little bit. Yeah. And then you landed at Denvr Dataworks.
Correct.
As I was doing my research on your background and your story, there was a few gentlemen, specifically your head of operations. He followed you pretty much as you shifted around your career. I'm kind of curious how important it is having those people in your life that I'm sure there's a lot of space and comfort and trust. And I'm kind of curious, for those that are listening, how important is that in your career?
To me, although I may seem social, I'm actually an introvert, right? I prefer time alone or the ones I love than with anybody else. Mike Zamora is a friend. He's a mentor. I trust him with my life. Right. And he's the guy that's followed me pretty well everywhere. Right. And I think we've followed each other. Right. So
that's a great way to put it.
If he were to go somewhere else and he tapped me on the shoulder,
you'd go with him.
I'd drop everything and go with him. Right. Because I know that he would have done it for a good reason and he needs my help. He is an incredible person. He's colorblind. So everywhere I go, if I see things being represented or red or green, I say, put some substance on that, put stripes, put something that will make a guy like that recognize the colors. Right. And so it's little things. He's an incredible artist, so creative, right? Doesn't have a degree, right? Yet he is one of the most the best students I've ever seen. Right. So for him, having somebody like that who, you can, with him and I, right? There are no filters. There's nothing that is, there are no sacred cows. There's nothing, right? If I have my head deep up my, he's the one to call me out on it.
He'll tell you,
right? And he won't do it, in a meeting. He'll respectfully pull me aside and say, hey, by the way, whatever, you need to figure it out. You're barking up the wrong tree. And I've done it to him as well. Right. So I think we're brothers from different mothers. He's from upstate Buffalo, incredible snowboarder, fantastic athlete. Right.
How is he at hockey?
We got him. He's actually taking hockey lessons right now, and we're not sure if he shoots left or right, but he's part of the hockey crew that with it seems in Canada, right? Especially by the company I'm at right now, I love the team. So diverse, so open. It's like it reminds me of Amazon back in its early days, and I really hope we can get that kind of success, right? But I mean, the individuals in there, Jeff, our CEO, Kyle, Steph, Marcy, Mike, right? Michelle, it just everybody rolls up their sleeves, and they do exactly what they need to do for each other. One of the individuals has had a really tough time through some family issues, right? And everybody is pitched in to make sure that
rally around them. That's
100%, the entire team, right? She indicated, hey, listen, I can't attend because of XYZ. Everybody cleared their calendars. Everybody went ahead, divided her workload to make sure that, that she mentally and physically is doing all right.
100%. That's fantastic. I do want to afford the opportunity to kind of talk through. So you're at Denvr Dataworks now. Kind of walk me through what it is that you're doing. Like, what's the pitch of those that are listening that could possibly maybe even give you a call about doing business? Kind of what's the spiel, man?
So we're developing. We're still in our formative years. We do have some good contracts on our laps. We are a cloud provider for AI services, right? So very boutique, right? Universities. We're also dealing with some large customers, and what we do is provide cloud services. So we set up, Kuba interface for them. We set up and manage whatever it is that they choose to run the networking fabric, InfiniBand or Roki, H100, A100, Gaudi 2 servers, right? So we set up the environment for them. We set up all their tools that they'll need to run their learning jobs, their language learning models, and now we're going into the inference modeling for them as well, right? So effectively, if you don't want to buy your servers, if you want somebody to take care of your services, you come to us and we'll take care of it for you. Not at the scale, often you hear we're going to be competing with, the AWS's, Microsoft's, Google's, Facebook of this world. That's never going to happen, right? These are $1 trillion companies, that have more money, have money to burn. That's not us, right? We're very specific in our audience, and we help you do what you need to do in the cloud AI space, right? Like you need to figure out, a weather pattern and whether you need to turn your furnaces on and off, and depending on the inbound entropy, we help you with that, right? So that's what we do. So it's a little outfit where we're doing. I think that our competitors are companies like CoreWeave, another gorilla in the room. So we're not there to compete with those cats. We think that the AI space is broad enough that there's going to be many players, just like the cloud space, and we're a boutique shop for those players.
Sounds like I haven't. Interesting just observation. I was like hearing you talk about your previous places of employment. You have a different aura when you talk about where you're at today. You're smiling a lot more. You kind of you're laughing a little bit more. So just from an outside perspective, it seems like you're having a lot of fun where you are.
Well, we are, and our as she calls herself, recovering lawyer Marcy, she goes, please don't throw us under the bus. They're very kind and they're very open and they're very honest, and it's refreshing, right? Like I said, it's Amazon in the formative years, right? Where everybody, put down their case and what they needed to do. Right now we're working infrastructure, right? So we do, we're diving into liquid immerse cooling, single phase, little touch and go, right? Because you run into some technical problems. We got a number of patents being filed, shocker, into some of those problems right now, right? Including, shadowing for GPUs when you put them in liquid immersed environment, the directive cooling, et cetera, right? And the reason that we kind of double down on that and not 2P, two-phase cooling is because, with all the issues 3M has had with the Novec fluids, right? We do think that this is an elegant, inexpensive solution. There's some engineering that needs to be done, and we're not afraid of that. But for us, we're running PUEs, power utilization effectiveness, of about 1.02, 1.01 in our environments, which means like we're reaching unity, and all our costs are really pump and fan costs, and that's it, right? Because no fans on those those servers, right? Like all it is just heat flux creating the density of fluid, stratification of the fluid, and that's how you cool. Super, it's nothing that is brand new. I mean, TikTok, BitDance, Alibaba is doing the thousands of racks in Asia Pac, right? So it's a clever, innovative solution. And guess what, right? There's going to be a lot of opportunities to innovate there, and that's what really drives me forward, right? So we're working right now through that innovation.
I'm excited to hear of the things, some of the challenges you were sharing yesterday, Oz, of how every aspect of the industry will change, operations and like different rule sets and things that will have to be put in place as the environment starts to change. You mentioned the highlight of people dropping things into the tubs with the coolant. Like that's a problem that doesn't exist in today's world, but now all of a sudden that's equivalent to hitting the EPO on what used to be a data center 10 years ago. So I'm really curious to see the problems that you'll encounter, since you're kind of ahead of most companies and kind of where you're headed in your R&D. So I'm kind of curious to see what not only the patents that you see, but kind of the challenges that you foresee solving, where most other companies are about 5 to 6 years probably behind you guys.
Yeah, an interesting outcome we've seen, number one, is because that fluid is so thermally, let's call it homogeneous, right? So we're not seeing any thermally derived failures on the servers, like zero, none, right? But the other problem that we have is, like for each GPU, 8 GPU, like whatever nodes, where 3OU or 4OU, it's the weight of those cables on top of those nodes. Because, if you take a look at one a Hopper node, it has 11 NICs, right? Network interface cards, right? 1 per GPU, 2 for management, and 1 out of band. Right, so you've got 11 NICs, so you've got 11 fiber cables sitting per server, right? And because of the limitations of connectivity, both on IB and Rocky networks, in order to really optimize your compute capacity, they all had to be in close proximity to each other. So suddenly, right, you've got, say, a tub, and we can run 150 kW tubs, 48 OU, right? So you've got 16 servers with this massive, so that's a challenge, right? Because, you're putting, axial stress on those NICs and stuff, right? So suddenly it's like, oh crap, we got to figure out how to offload the servers and the weight so that they don't cause issues. So little details like that. You drop a can of fluid into that mineral oil, and that mineral oil is done. Yeah. Right, like it's done. You actually have to flush out the entire system and put in new one, and a new oil, right? So again, right, different problems now.
I mean, the concept of like concurrent maintainability starts to come to mind on like now you're on the software stack side, because it's not just if you have to drain that. Like I'm assuming those servers are going off, and so like, there's things that come to mind immediately. That's like, man, there's some challenging problems.
Yeah, the beauty about language learning models, right, is that, as you output whatever it is that you're trying to learn, you can stop the environment and crank it up. So, when you're looking, it is 100% software solutions. It is 100%. And, one of the best companies, Alphabet, are brilliant at creating those software solutions.
It opens the door to the elegance and simplicity on the infrastructure side.
Huge. Yeah. I remember walking into, like our industry, the data center world is just rife with awards. Everybody's giving each other awards for something or another. I remember walking into Amazon's data center in Virginia, and the first, this is in Fairfax County, and I remember opening the door to the data center when I first took it over, and the first thing I saw was a number of award certificates for the design, and it was a pneumatic dampener design that just kind of redirected the air in the subfloor, right? So I walk in and I go, well, I'm interested to see because, coming from the oil field, anything pneumatic is eventually going to leak. It's going to have to be replaced.
Yeah.
You've got these tanks. Yeah. You've got these high pressure, you've got a leak in a high pressure system and you got yourself a problem if you can't see them, right? So I walked in, like all these awards, first thing I see, the first thing I want to see is the pneumatic system that's operating all the dampers. I look at it, I leave about, I get the maintenance cost of the pneumatic system. So I did the only thing I could do, which is order all ripped out and just straight up static pressure on the subfloor, and the air's going to go where it needs to go. Yeah. And we're going to modulate the air handlers depending on the static pressure on the floor. Drop in static pressure, air handle velocity comes up. Yeah. Period. No more pneumatic silliness. No more 1,000 sensors telling the sensors to open. So
now, in the defense of whoever engineered that system, it does sound pretty like if I'm a mechanical engineer or controls engineer, that's a challenging problem, and cost isn't a thing. That's a challenge. That's a creative way to tackle the problem. But I can definitely see when you're really getting into a maturing company, cost is at the most important. Simplicity is elegant, and there's so many advantages in that.
Yeah, it's an innovative solution until you have to fix the system.
Yeah, or you have to pay for that at scale. Yeah, no, 100%.
I know I get it. I'm creative, and maybe a scale is the point here, right? That everything that you do, I tell the teams, and I stole this from previous CEO of Amazon, which is, hey, great, it works at 1,000 units. Will it work at 5 million units? And everything you ever did at Amazon, right? You actually thought of the scale factor. So if you built it for X, you actually were required to make sure that it worked at X at raised to the fourth power, right? Wow. So exponential increase, everything, absolutely everything was a 6-pager that required to and maybe the solution was, hey, after we hit 1 million units, we're going to have to scrap it and go to another system. And that was a perfectly acceptable
That's an
solution.
Okay answer, as long as that was in the plan from the beginning.
It was an answer.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. I want to make sure we cover, so we've kind of highlighted your career through growing up in Chile to Canada. You mentioned hockey. I kind of feel bad for not asking. What's your favorite hockey team?
Well, it's going to have to be Edmonton Oilers.
Okay.
Right. Like I probably have, a dozen jerseys with, McDavid, Draisaitl, my favorite player, one of my favorite players, Evander Kane, a diverse player who's been much maligned, but a top-notch human being.
Evander Kane from the one. Okay. And if it's not them, who's your number 2 team?
We're going to have to go to the Florida Panthers.
Okay. I knew Florida was coming in, but okay.
With a much maligned Matthew Tkachuk at the helm.
Okay.
Very emotional player whom I hated when I played against them with the Edmonton Oilers. I didn't play against the team, but now I love him that he plays for the Panthers.
But you probably love the emotion now, and you love what he does.
Oh, he delivers. I mean, he's a bit of a rat on the ice, a little bit of an agitator, but he gets it done.
Okay, and I'm kind of curious. We've covered most of your career. Are there any topics or any stories or anything that you want to make sure our listeners out there? And but again, they're both either students or young professionals that are like the whole goal of the Lighthouse. Why we've called it the Lighthouse is we want to be like a guiding light. Like there aren't a lot of people that are in this space. You said it the other day or earlier. 2 or 3% of the leadership is Hispanic or Latino in this space. And so there's not a lot of people else, and you've been in this industry for a long time. And so a lot of our listeners are just like looking for like, hey, I want to hear his story. I want to hear how he got to where he got. Are there anything that we touched on or didn't touch on, more importantly, that you think is important to share?
Yeah, I think, no matter where you are, find a mentor. Right? Find somebody who you can, and the mentor, if the mentor is a lot like you, it's not going to help. The mentor has got to be different than you, right? Because then you'll see another side of the way the world is looked at. Like at Microsoft, I never had a solid mentor, right? At Amazon, I always had a mentor. Right. And it really does make a difference. And the mentor could be your boss. It could be somebody that works for you. Right. It doesn't have to be somebody, it's got to be somebody that I would recommend be different than you and listen. right? You don't have to do everything that they tell you, but find somebody with whom you can bounce things off. It's super important. If you don't have that, I do believe that your career is going to be stalled substantially.
How did you go? I'm curious to just dig in a little bit on that, Oz. How did you go about finding those mentors? Was that a formal request? Is that something that, I feel like so many mentors in my life don't probably know that they're my mentor, but I absolutely consider them one. So I'm kind of curious, in your experience, are the organic ones the best ones, or has there been instances where you've actually have had that, hey, Oz, will you be my mentor, man? I want to pick your brain. I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on that.
So for me, right, the mentors have approached them. They've never, at Amazon, they have a great mentoring page, and Microsoft did as well. I find that a little too unnatural, right? It's like you're going through a list. It's like, call it, almost like internet dating. Right. So you're going through the list and you're deciding, hey, I want to go. Most of them is the way I found it's people that, first of all, I try to, use people that are different than me. Right. So one of my mentors was also the, Dave Clark was the CEO, I think, for a minute for a U.S. retail at Amazon. He's nothing like me. He's a fine arts grad. Right. I think he's got business, Harvard Business School, a college, super smart. He's opposite to what I would be. I learned a ton from the guy, right? And one of the stories I think I shared earlier was that, he asked me a question, and I'm always been a keener. I want to get the stuff done right now. So I went home, wrote a 6-pager after my mentoring session, and sent it to him the next day. So he calls me in. It's like, oh, wow, okay, well, that was quick, right? We had a monthly mentoring session. He goes, you know what? I didn't even read what you sent me. So I'll be honest, I saw it, I opened it, it pissed me off because I can tell you right now that you didn't think about the problem, right? The problem that I posed to you, you're not going to figure out and send me a 6-page, which I'm glad that you stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning because I noticed that that's when you sent it out, but it's not what I'm looking for. I want you to think about it. And don't send me crap anymore until you've thought about it. So you and I are going to talk about our next mentoring session in the next month. Don't bother sending me emails until then. We'll talk about this particular problem until you've thought it through. And I thought, you know what? When you're pedal to the metal and you're ready to go and you're on turbo mode, that is the perfect advice. Is shut up, listen, take your time, be thoughtful, be planful, then deliver.
Interesting me, a third party hearing that, when I'm hearing him say, but I don't know if you would have responded the same way, is, hey, Oz, awesome, great work. Why don't you take some time and just let the problem stew in your brain a little bit? Because when you come back at it with a fresh mind, you're probably going to solve it in a way better way. And then let's talk about it. But if you would have told you it that way, you probably wouldn't have listened to us.
You're probably right.
That's what I heard. Yeah. The interpreter in me was hearing his voice. Yeah. What is he trying to say? But I don't think you would have got that. So
my reputation precedes me, right? So he probably knew exactly how it was. And if you're right, if he would have said that, it's this bullshit. I probably would have not gone to the next mentoring session, right?
It would have said soft,
I'm done. But he is I didn't even read it, and that caught my attention when he said I just deleted the email. That immediately caught my attention.
That's deep.
So I thought, okay, gotcha.
Kind of curious. How did the next? It
was,
can't leave everybody on the cliffhanger. Yeah, how did the next?
It was a better solution than what I had posed to him the first time around, because he was right. It wasn't a matter of going out there and getting the work done. I think the reason and I could tell he was a little pissed because he just thought that I treated him like a check mark. I need to do this, and I got it done. He wanted a thoughtful explanation. And he was, again, right, when you're dealing with Spanish people, right, Latin people, just be to the point. Yeah. Don't beat around the bush, right? That's for us, for me, for you as well, Alfonso. I bet you respond much better when it's right to the point. It's 100%. Hey, listen, you need to do this. It's okay, done.
Yeah, it's so much easier. It's just so much it saves both of our times, and you're not I have thick skin. I'm fine. Just tell me what I need to hear. Let's move on.
Well, I'm going to be butthurt a little bit initially. It's how could you possibly not?
I stayed up till 3 a.m. working on this. You could have at least read it. No, I get it, 100%.
But at the end of the day, you're gonna it's gonna be a quick iteration, right? You're gonna say, oh my God, that was kind of harsh, and then you're gonna look at it and go, you know what? He's kind of right. Right? I put all my energy and focus on this, and I didn't see beyond the trees.
Okay. So for those that are listening out there, it's like, man, I really resonated with a lot of what Os said, and they want to reach out. I ask all of our speakers this: what's the best way to reach out to you? LinkedIn, your blog? What do you recommend?
I've got a blog, and it, the blog, it's not for everybody. So don't hate on it. And I'll be posting another one. I'm busy now, so I can't really write as much as I wish I would. So, email me. Right. My direct email is on LinkedIn, right? Write comments on the blog, reach out to me, right? Like one thing like every time that I've been promoted, right? Like the announcement goes out and I get thousands of congratulations. I think I can honestly say I have answered 100% of the emails that's sent out. Like if you send me an email, if you reach out to me, I will respond, right? It may not be immediate because I may be dealing with a huge backlog, but I will respond. I remember when I was running operations at Microsoft, right? I would chase down all the individuals because we implemented a number of programs that really developed. Like we worked with a number of partners at Microsoft, and I'll give Microsoft a lot of credit for trying to develop this, right? Like Cisco networking engineer certifications. We made the time and place and gave people credits for actually getting that, and a lot of people would actually use that. It's a lot of their, you pay for the course. The company paid for the course and gave them the time and space to do the course, but they still had to run the effort and get certified on it. And maybe you didn't use it for that job, but I just thought it'd be a huge thank you for the individuals so that they can use either project management skills or networking engineering skills from Cisco in their courses for the next career. So it didn't leave their resumes stable. If you wanted to, wasn't a requirement. Whenever they posted that they passed one of those courses, I would always go in and congratulate them.
That's awesome.
Right? So the follow-up for them was that I was watching, right? And I run on data, so I would find out if the investment in the course was worth it. And for me, the investment is in the course, how many people took it on, how many people passed, and we'd get those numbers. Right. So we continued investing. I don't know what they're doing now, but we continue investing to make sure that the people. So for me, if you reach out, it's a two-way street. I first of all, I'm humbled, but that you reach out to me. And number two, I will respond. So reach out to me, LinkedIn. My personal email is on there, and we can take it from there.
Awesome. For those that are listening, I can attest. I did a cold outreach to Oz, wanting to invite him to the podcast. And he responded, and he is here. So I can attest to you are a man of your words. So please reach out if you're listening. So, okay, Oz, and would you want to just make sure any other, areas that you wanted to cover or things that you wanted to make sure our listeners are able to get from your story? Because you have a remarkable story.
You hear this often, but don't give up, right? People will notice the effort. People will appreciate you. Right? You have allies out there. And I know that, in this divisive world that we are living in today, and it is divisive, right? There's a lot of hate out there. Don't be part of that. Don't be part of the problem. And I love, haven't heard it for a long time. Jeff, our CEO now, says, listen, don't bring me a problem without bringing me a solution along with that problem. And it may not be one solution, maybe multiple solutions, but give me options. Don't come in there and say, well, this is all messed up. We got to fix it. It's like, follow it up, right? So for everybody out there, remember, right? If we're going through, you may not have the best grades in school. It may be a long hill climb. Your boss may not be the one that you think is going to be an ally of yours. First of all, find ways how to better it, extend an olive branch. If that doesn't go somewhere else, right? If you're really as good as you think you are, your skills will be celebrated wherever it is that you go through, wherever you go. Do not lose faith. Keep working. Consider what you have, consider where you want to go, and make those decisions based on it's okay to be a pillar of your team. If all you want to do, and I hire people like this all the time, if all you want to do is you want to come in, you want to do a good job for the 8 hours that you're at work, you want to go home at 5 every day and spend the time for the family, but you are a reliable deliverer, there's a lot of room for people like that. If you're a go-getter, right, there's a lot of room for people like that. You drive your own destiny, right? If you want to change things, change starts with you. Identify your allies. There isn't very many of us in this community at the levels that can make a difference, right? Making a difference is, it's you saying, I want to hire that individual. I'm going to bypass HR processes. I want them in, and I will take them on my risk. So I always tell everybody, if you want to hire your mom, you may have to fire your mom. So you got to be in there heads up, right? So you come in, you want to hire your best friend, you may have to eventually let go of your best friend. And I've done that, right? With that being said, find your ally, listen, right? Don't just hear, listen, right? And do what you think is right for yourself. If you're stuck in a position where you think that you're not being used effectively, then drive your own destiny. Find out where you can be, where you will be celebrated, and go there.
That's fantastic, Os. Thank you very, very much for the time, and thank you for taking the time with us. I really enjoyed the conversation, so I can't thank you enough for coming down to Austin and talking to us.
Thank you for the invite.
All right.
I appreciate being here.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate all the listeners, and stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.